Issues in comparison between comparing incomes of the developing countries and the developed countries. Well, if you look at it, that you have countries which are developing on the one side, for example, India, Pakistan, etc., and the other countries like developed nations, for example, US, Canada on the other. Now, we understand this that as far as developing countries are concerned, the low per capita income is the most important feature of economic development, low economic development, and we cannot deny that. I mean, whatever we say that economic development has many other features, yes, it has, but still, low income is a very important characteristic of low economic development. Now, the point is that if we understand this, then how do we compare the incomes of the developing and the developed nations? So the one way is, for example, there are the prices of goods which are traded in my country, and because they will be in different currencies. For example, in rupee, it could be in Pakistani rupee or takas or any other country, any other local currency, right? But then, in case if I want to make a comparison between India and Pakistan, then there has to be a similar currency, right? So the idea is that we all would convert these currencies into a single currency, let's say dollar. And then we divide that total income by the population in order to get the estimate of the per capita income of the country. This is what it is. हमारी जो भी लोकल करेंसी है, पहले उसको डॉलर्स में कन्वर्ट करना है, और उसके बाद जो भी मेरी इनकम डॉलर में आएगी उसको पॉपुलेशन से डिवाइड करना है in order to get the per capita income. And that is giving me the estimate of the per capita income, and this is what is called the exchange rate method. Now, it has certain problems. What it does is that because of this method which we use, there are very sharp disparities between the developing and the developed nations. Income disparities between the developing and the developed nations. But the exchange rate method, it does not provide a very reliable estimate. Why do we say so? That it does not provide a much reliable estimate. One reason is that in the developing countries, people have a tendency that they will be underreporting their income. When you and I are going to underreport our incomes, then naturally this is not going to go into my national income accounts. That will not be a part of my GDP, GNP, anything. So how will I make the comparison then? In developed countries, the tax systems are very efficient, but not in many of the developing countries. So there are ways of, there are various loopholes that we can cheat the system. Secondly, in developing countries also, what we have realized is that there is a very high proportion of output which is being generated for self-consumption. For example, farmers, right? I mean, when they produce them, they can produce to the market and they can also produce for self-consumption. But that is not being traded. Exchange rate method is going to take up only those goods and services which are being traded internationally, right? So there is a tendency that we are leaving apart huge portion of the incomes which are generated, but they're not accounted. So the exchange rate method does not give much reliable estimates, one thing. The prices of many goods in the developing countries, they are not appropriately reflected in the exchange rates. Now, why are we saying so? Because not all kinds of goods are being traded. That is, they are not crossing the international borders from the developing countries to the developed countries. And there are many goods which are being produced only for self-consumption. There are many non-traded goods, for example, the prices for infrastructure, etc. They are not crossing the international borders. Why are we concerned with the international borders? Because exchange rate is going to reflect only the prices which are crossing the international borders, only the prices of goods which are crossing the international borders, right? So in this case, the prices of non-traded goods are not included in the exchange rates. Secondly, poor countries are poor, right? I mean, they will have the low prices even for the non-traded goods. Their real incomes are not going to be sufficient that they can pull up to the international standards. And having said so, it means that if you're going to use the exchange rate method, it will be underestimating the real income of the developing nations. So underreporting, because of underreporting of income, the exact income of the developing countries is not being reflected. Because of huge proportion of goods which are being produced for self-consumption, exact amount of income is not being reflected of the developing countries. Because exchange rate is going to take care of only the goods, is going to take care of the prices of only those goods which are crossing the international borders. The exact income of the developing countries is not being taken care of, right? Then GNP measurement also has some problems. You even forget about the exchange rate problems. GNP, when you're going to compare the GNP of the country, developing countries and the developed countries, again, you will see certain problems. One problem is that you are using market prices in order to find out GNP. Now, what is the problem with the market prices? The problem is that you cannot assume that all markets are perfectly competitive. You cannot assume that all prices are fully flexible. There are monopolies, there are oligopolies, there are public utility companies which are going to sell only at the dictated prices, right? So you can't say that they are being governed by the market. No. One. Secondly, you have the government in place. Government also provides or purchases various goods and services, but it is not doing this for the market. Government has a paternalistic attitude towards its citizens. So government is not motivated by the profit motive. So they are not working for the profits. And the prices which the government services have, for example, military services, for example, bureaucracy, they do not reflect exactly the cost of providing these services. Another thing. Then many times the projects which you take up, GNP, in GNP, you have the various prices, the prices of the projects also, but you do not understand, you do not include the cost of externalities in this. For example, you want to build up a dam, right? That dam is going to be beneficial for the country. There is going to be the economic development, but who is going to bear the cost of relocating the people who were living earlier in that location of a dam? So those things are being ignored. So the point is that there are problems in measurement. You can't just compare GNP. You can't just compare using exchange rate method. So these are the issues while you're comparing the incomes between the developing countries and the developed countries. The reference for this is Debraj Ray. I hope you find this video useful. Thank you, Beta.